I honestly think one of the hardest parts of making your own clothes is fitting them on yourself. I mean, fitting is difficult enough when you're doing it on somebody else, knowing which adjustments to make, what order to make them, and never mind when you can't see your own back and you can't reach to pin things where they need to be. It's a nightmare. So what I thought I'd do today is walk you through how I fit toiles and mock-ups on myself to get the best fit I can. The reality is, if you're fitting something on yourself, you are going to have to compromise somewhere. That's just the way it is. But you can still do a lot. So let's get started. Okay, team, so the setup here isn't ideal because I'm limited for space. Also, the microphone's over here. Hello, so hopefully the sound is okay. But the first step to successful fitting is appropriate undergarments. It's one of those things that I think people often overlook. Obviously, if you're doing a historical costume, you need your corset and your bustle, blah, 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 blah. But even if you're fitting a modern garment, you need to make sure you're wearing the sort of thing underneath what you're fitting that you would in the real garment. So, for example, if it's a coat, there's no point just fitting it over your knickers. You need something underneath it. If it's a winter coat, are you going to be wearing woolly jumpers? You know, if it's a summer dress and you're going to wear it next to the skin, then there's no point fitting it over a t-shirt, for example. Also, don't underestimate the kind of bra you wear. It makes such a difference to the position and the height of the bust and the spacing of sort of the volume of the bust. So that's something to bear in mind as well. If you know you only ever wear sports bras or bralettes or whatever, there's no point doing the fitting over a push-up padded number, because then when you go to wear the garment in real life, it's not going to fit the best way it could. As this is a 1940s garment, I have on my vintage slip. This is from a 1950s pattern, but they all sort of do the same sort of job. I've got tights on, it's a modern style bra, it's not like a soft cut 1940s one, but it's one I wear a lot for vintage stuff. So it's likely I'm going to wear this bra or a bra in this style with my 1940s suit. The other thing, of course, take off jewellery, particularly earrings and necklaces and things that might get stuck or caught, or if you're getting a pair of scissors in to cut something you don't want to accidentally damage. Same with hair, tie your hair up out of the way, because if you're trying to snip into a neckline or something to release it, it's very easy to lop off a bit of your hair. The other thing, of course, is you may want to consider wearing appropriate shoes with whatever it is you're making, particularly if it's a long garment, a floor-length garment, or a pair of trousers, that sort of thing, because that is definitely going to affect, firstly, the way you stand, but also how long you need your trousers to be, for example. My suit is only just below knee, so I'm not bothering with shoes, but it's just something to bear in mind. So, let's get started. So this is the toile for my skirt. Let's start with that. One thing I often find as well, why do people step into skirts? Put them on over your head. It's so much easier. You don't have to stand on one leg and hop about, and you don't have to put like your grubby shoes or feet on your lovely pristine garment. The thing with this is I've got to pin this on myself. Now, doing it at the back, it's going to be really difficult. So what I think I'm going to do, simply swizzle it around to the front and pin it using safety pins where I can see it. So I've got a 1/2 inch seam allowance. I can see I've chalked on my sewing lines so I know where that seam allowance is. So I've simply got to slot the pin in. Perfect. And I'm probably going to put in another pin down here just in case it's too tight on the hips in it. Just in case it gapes like that. Okay, fab. That'll probably do for the skirt. So let's move it around and get it to sit approximately where it's supposed to be. As you can already tell, too big, but we'll come back to that one in a minute. So here we are, toile for the bodice. You may notice it has sleeves now. I did film putting the sleeves in yesterday, but I was also watching the World Cup final, so the footage isn't great. But I used the method that I always use for sleeves, and I made an entire video, lucky you, dedicated just to that. So if you're really interested in seeing exactly how I do the precision pinning and the easing in for sleeves, check that video out. It'll save us both a lot of time. Here we are. This is my jacket toile or blouse toile. And then again, what I'm going to do is pin it down the centre front. When I was sewing this, I deliberately left the centre front open rather than the side seam, because I knew it's going to be much easier to pin the centre front on myself than it is. I've just realised what that weird arm waving I was doing in the last video was. What am I even doing? Much easier to pin the centre front than try and pin a side seam on yourself. So again, safety pins. Now this jacket, oh well, yeah, that's good. I included the balance mark. It's open at the centre front to this point. So that's where I'm going to start pinning. But if there's anything particularly funky happening with the shoulders, I'll pin it right up so that I can really get a good feel for how it's supposed to fit. And again, I'm just following in the chalked in line of my seam allowance to get these pins in place. You can, if you're struggling to see the chalk lines, you can machine or hand tack in the sewing lines, and that makes it a bit easier. So here we are, we're ready to start our fitting. You may also, before you start thinking about these things, want to turn up hems and see where they're hitting. But I find, I know I'm short, I have to hem it anyway, I have to do uneven hems because of my scoliosis, so I tend to leave that for now. But if you don't have issues like that and you need to consider whether something's going to be too short or not for you, I would recommend pinning in all the hems on the sleeves, on the skirt hem, on the jacket hem, things like that, so that you've got an exact idea of where everything is going to hit you. So, do you know what? This actually fits quite well. Let's have a look at the back. Oh, okay, maybe not so the back. It's very wrinkly in the back. I'll have to look at the footage and see what I think, because obviously I can't see. So this is something I do recommend if you are fitting on yourself. If you can get your phone on selfie camera and prop it up somewhere and take a video of yourself, you know, front or photographs, or get somebody to take photographs of you. Front, side on, and then facing the back as well. It's also much easier, I think, at times to see fit issues in a static image than it is in a moving one, because you're like, oh, are those shoulders weird? I don't know. And then you go to reach to adjust something and you can't see what the issue was anymore. So it's really useful to have those still images to refer back to. So now we've got it on, where do we start? Like I say, this on me is quite a good fit. So unfortunately, it's not the best model to use to demonstrate. I've also got my reference image here. So this is the pattern envelope design. And it's really important to have, I find, a finished image that you're aiming for in mind. So that might be the front cover of the pattern illustration, it might be whatever, if it's a design you've done yourself, a sketch you've done yourself, or maybe you're a cosplayer and you're recreating something from a screenshot. Get that screenshot up in front of you in the fitting so that you can see precisely what it's supposed to look like, and that makes it much easier to spot where things are wrong on you. Not wrong, but out. So now it's on, where do we start? Well, we always start at the top with the shoulder seams, because the thing is with a fitting, as soon as you make an alteration, it has knock-on effects. So if you alter the shoulder seam, it's going to impact the neck. If you alter the bust darts, it's going to impact the way the sleeve fits, so on and so forth. So it's always best to start at the top where the garment sits. So for bodices, jackets, that sort of thing, that's the shoulders, and on trousers or skirts, that's the waist, and then work down the body from there. So looking at these shoulders, first of all, you can probably also see I've put shoulder pads in. This design has shoulder pads in, so I've added shoulder pads for the fitting, because that's how it's going to fit in the final fabric. You'll be spotting a common theme here. Now, this design has this very low, almost bat wing style armhole, and you can see that shoulder is right out here. Not so much in the short sleeve version, but on this lady, that's a really exaggerated sleeve line, and that's very typical of the 1940s. So that's the thing, when I look at this, I think to myself, oh, that shoulder is really falling off the top of my arm. It needs to be more like there to fit appropriately as a bodice would. However, I think that's part of the design. I think it's supposed to sit off like that, and that's how you get that exaggerated. Because you see, if I put my hand on my hip, like this lady, I'm getting a similar sort of line to her. So I wonder whether I need to adjust that at all. Similarly, one of the first things to always check is where the shoulder seam is hitting. It should be completely straight. It shouldn't tip backwards, it shouldn't tip forward. So it shouldn't be at an angle forward like that, or at an angle backwards like that. It should be straight from the base of your neck to the tip of your shoulder. And that's quite often what you hear called a forward shoulder adjustment, or a rounded upper back adjustment, something like that. That's a common shoulder adjustment we have to make, particularly on modern bodies, because we all spend our lives hunched over a computer screen or a sewing machine in some of our cases. So it's quite common to need to have a forward shoulder and to have to adjust this shoulder seam. Mine actually looks spot on. It looks fine. So I think we can leave that where it is. But I do wonder whether I want to take these in just a fraction. like a centimetre, because it is very far off the shoulder, to the extent that like I've got quite a lot of hollow space in here. I think let's pin it and try it, even if it's just for the sake of demonstration. I also think because it's too wide across the upper back, and that's why I'm getting that sort of pooling, the fabric is kind of in a U shape, or it was at least anyway in the video. That suggests to me it is just a touch wide across the upper back. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it in and I'm going to pin in a wedge down to the bust point because it fits fine in the bust. That's enough ease for me. That's kind of what I want in a jacket style. I think I'm going to pinch out a dart over the shoulder like that, just to bring it in just a touch. I'm going to go over the shoulder seam in one continuous line down to the top of the dart at the upper back. So there's no way I'm going to be able to pin that with the garment on. So do you know what? Let's take it off. And then as well, we can have a sit down. Okay, so here we are. I'm going to start with the back because having looked at the footage, there was definitely a very deliberate sort of, the fabric was wanting to crease in a diagonal line from the shoulder to the top of the dart, sort of like that. So if it's sitting like that naturally on its own, that means there's too much fabric there. A general rule for fitting, doesn't always work like this, but a general rule is that if you have vertical puckers, wrinkles, sort of like that, it's too big. If you have horizontal wrinkles like that, means it's too small. So that's a really useful guide to sort of know where something, if it's pulling in lots of different places, it's a good way to know where to start. So I want to take this width out evenly across both sides. So the best way I think I can do that is to measure in from my shoulder seam. I've got to contend with the shoulder pad in there, but it's only tacked in at this end, so that should be fine. So I think, let's say 7 centimetres along the shoulder seam. Yep, perfect. Have I got a pencil? Yep. Oh, no, I don't. When I make fit alterations, I don't use chalk, I use pencil, because chalk is liable to rub off. That's why we use chalk. And you do not want your fit alterations to rub off, because then what was the point of doing the fitting? So 7 centimetres in. And then I don't think I really want to take out that much, because I still want room across the back to be able to move my shoulder blades. So I think what I want here is a centimetre out. So I'm going to measure a centimetre. And then with a safety pin on this side, I'm going to match up that mark, those 2 pencil marks, to create a very small tuck. Like I say, this is minuscule alteration, so I have no idea if we'll notice any difference. I'm going to safety pin that in. And then same again on the other side. And the reason I'm using safety pins and not straight pins is for the very simple reason of there's going to be a lot of pins in this garment and I don't want to stab myself. So what I want to do is taper that excess out to nothing over the bust. However, that's actually doable on myself and I'll probably get a more accurate result if I do it on myself. It may not be even, but humans aren't even, so that's fine. But what I do want is I want to pinch a centimetre out in a diagonal line from this mark to this mark. So I'm going to crease the fabric as best as I can along there. And I think it was a bit big still at the top of the dart. I'll need to think about that. First of all, I'm going to just put a pin in at the centimetre mark here, but actually it's doubled, so it's not a centimetre, it's half a centimetre. Voila. And then we're going to put all along here, we're going to mark in half a centimetre and put pins in at that point. At regular intervals. How far apart to put your pins depends on, you know, how fitted the garment is. You may need them literally end to end. But I think because this is a slightly looser fit, every few centimetres should be fine for this one. And again, I'm measuring precisely because the reality is if I was doing this on somebody else, I could do it by eye and be like, yeah, that's enough, a little bit there, but I can't do it that way on myself. So I need to know, I need to keep a record of exactly what I've done. So it has to be consistent, otherwise we won't know what we're doing. And when we come to particularly if we're taking it off and on again, we'll lose track of what we're doing. So I reckon one last one there. Okay, and then I'm going to do exactly the same thing on the other side. Okay, so there's my second tuck on the back. I've also written myself a note so that I know what I've done so I don't forget. Now let's put this back on and see how that changes things. Oh, and pin those things on the front. I mean, maybe it goes without saying, but you really need to pin things as precisely as you are going to sew them in the real thing. Otherwise, you don't know how they're going to fit. As you know, I pin and sew things very precisely. That means I have to take a lot of time pinning everything together, but oh well. Okay, so what did I want to do? I wanted to pinch out the excess here to nothing. See, this is a perfect example of where it's a bit big. I've got a vertical line. Can you see that? Yeah. So we're just going to take out a little smidgen. We're finishing about there, I reckon. Yeah, you can kind of see that's where the wrinkle ends. So let's put a pin in. And then let's try and get that matching up nicely. I think I need one there. Still quite difficult to do this on yourself. You see what I mean? I might have to put a pin in here so that I don't accidentally tug it this way. Even though this is not how it will be worn, will help me as I'm faffing about with it. I can already tell how much better that is, and it's only roughly pinned in the front there. I've still got that exaggerated 1940s line. I'm getting so much less puckering across the front here, and even on this one you can see how much smoother it is just with that tiny tuck at the shoulder. So let's have a look at the back. I have to see what it looks like. So as you can see across the upper back here, I am getting some horizontal wrinkling, and I don't think that's because it's too small, my own frame. Yes, I think it's because where I've pinned it, the fabric is distorted a little bit, because you can see it's not straining at all. Even if I'm like hulking out of it, it's fine. However, it is still pooling in a weird way at the top of these darts, which says to me that it's too big through this section of the back here. So what I think I need to do is I need to continue down this tuck right the way down almost to the bottom of the dart, so that there's a little bit extra being taken out. Not too much, because then it will be too fitted, but I think to about here I can feel on myself. Let's see if I can't try and mark it with a pencil on myself. This is the reality of making your own clothes, having to fit on yourself. Let's hope that worked. So I'm going to take it off again, pin that in again, and try it all on again. So here we are. This is a lesson in letting the fabric do what the fabric wants to do. So you can see, take that pin out for now, that's where I penciled on the mark that I think I needed to ease the dark out to. You can't really see it. Let's make it a bit more obvious for your sake. There we are. So when I pinch from the shoulder down to this point, you can see that actually we have got a very unusual line happening here, which is probably why it's not fitting me. It needs to be a lot rounder, a lot smoother, and actually I think it needs to ease out even further down. I think it needs to come to about there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that pin in there, and you can see how almost I need more here than I did up here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this pin over a bit. I reckon we need to take out about 2 centimetres here, so yeah, there, that now, that line of pins there now just looks so much smoother and more appropriate, more pleasing, if you like. You know, it's just less awkward somehow. So what I need to do now is do exactly the same thing on the other side, which is tricky. So what I'm going to have to do is fold along the dart again, match everything up. See, where's the top of this dart? There. Where's the top of this dart? There. Okay. It looks like the darts were slightly different lengths anyway from my poor sewing. Then what I want to do is, where that pin is going into that fabric there, I want to make sure I put in the pin for the other side. So I'm going to, like I do with the precision pinning for sewing lines, yeah, that looks about right. I mean, I could measure, actually, it looks a bit big, doesn't it? Let's take it out a little bit, there we are. And then it was 1 centimetre at the top of the dart for this pin, so I'm going to unpin that pin. Also, it looks like I pinned it a little bit off, and then mark in 1 centimetre here. Put that pin back in. Lovely jubbly. Right, let's put it on again. Okay, here we are, back again. Let's have a look. What do you think? It feels fine. It doesn't feel too tight. So I guess I'll just have to look at the footage. Yeah, do you know what? I'm pretty happy with that. I think that's about as close as we're going to get, team. So maybe I could play around with this a bit more. But at the same time, I do want this to be a garment with some ease. So I don't want to overfit it, you know, because I'm really happy with the way it fits at the waistline. It feels really comfortable. It's fitted, and because of the exaggerated shoulder line, I've still got that hourglass 1940s shape, but it's not gonna dig in, strain, make me feel uncomfortable when I eat my Christmas dinner, that sort of thing. I think we call this good on the bodice. However, the sleeves are too long. These are supposed to be 3/4 length sleeves, and they're not. Now, part of me wonders if I've misunderstood the instructions. So let's check that first of all. Okay, so I have misunderstood the instructions. There are options for a long sleeve, a 3/4 length sleeve, and a short sleeve. So as far as long sleeves go, I think they fit quite well. I might make them long sleeves, to be honest, because 3/4 length sleeves in the winter are just awkward. And it's not like I'm not intending to wear this as like sort of high, true vintage with a pair of gauntlet style gloves and a hat. You know, I want to wear this jacket as a jacket. It's not a jacket, is it? But I'm gonna make it a jacket. You know, I want these pieces to be like more versatile wardrobe staples for me. So I think long sleeves will actually work better for me. So in which case, it's just 1/2 inch seam allowance. And I think with 1/2 inch seam allowance, that will be fine. I mean, the elbow darts seem to hit in the right place. So great. Sorry, can't show you how to alter those. You may remember when I was altering the pattern, I was worried that I took some of the length out of the upper back, and I took some out of the back of the sleeve head as well, and I pivoted it at an angle. So I was worried that would alter the pitch of my sleeve, but it actually looks fine. There's no obvious diagonal lines there, no massive pulling or puckering. There's plenty of room in there. I can move my arms. See, this is why you spend all that time measuring the pattern pieces before you start, because it makes the fitting process so much easier. So the only other thing I think we need to consider is the length of the bodice, because as you can see, the skirt is riding down. That's because the skirt is too big. We'll get there. But also the bodice is riding up a little bit, which makes me think it's a touch too short. I did shorten it quite a lot, particularly in the back. You can really see I've got a lot of fabric on show there. But what I also haven't done is added the peplum, because I thought I'd probably have to alter the shape of the waist, which I don't. I didn't add the peplum because then it would have made it more difficult to alter the waist. But now what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the peplum pieces and stitch them on with my 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then see how I feel about the length of the bodice, because, you know, it's short for a jacket, but with the peplum, I might be glad of it hitting exactly at my narrowest bit to really help with the hourglass 40s shape and to balance, frankly, the very wide shoulders. So we're going to leave that one for now and move on to the skirt. So if you were with me through all those many pattern adjustments I made, you will know I added a lot to the hip curve because I didn't think it was going to fit in the hip. Maybe I didn't quite need that much, but at the same time, it's nice to have a bit of room, isn't it? I think part of the issue is that it's hitting in the wrong place. So first of all, we need to take in the waist. Now, do I do this evenly across every seam? Do I pin in darts? Do I just take it out of the side seam? Because I do naturally have quite a sway back, I actually think maybe it might be the easiest to take it in at the centre back. I mean, we're going to have to come back to these seams anyway, because that's not where my hips are. But I think let's take it out at the centre back and a little bit at the side seams as well. Thankfully, this one, I can just alter by doing, I don't have to keep taking on and off and on and off again. So how much do I want to take out? Total, and then we can divide that by 3. So I reckon that'd be a bit tight, a bit less. Yeah, that would be perfect. So it looks like we're taking out 3 centimetres, so a centimetre across each seam. And then same again. Add the pin. Let's keep going around this side. Add in a pin. Okay, so then let's get everything back to centre. Yeah, much better, much more comfortable. Is it dipping down at the back? Part of the way to tell whether something's fitting or not is whether the seams are perpendicular to the floor or parallel to the floor. Now obviously on me, nothing is ever parallel to the floor. But you can see the side seam is looking lovely and straight here, but the skirt side seams are tipping forward because it's too low at the back. So I think we need to take it in even more at the back. It needs to come in and hug the small of my back. Yeah, about another centimetre, I think. So here we go again. Now, of course, I could add some darts. However, as the original design didn't have darts, trying to avoid that to sort of keep the integrity of the design or what have you. But sometimes you just have to accept not everybody is suited to every style. So here you can see actually what I'm talking about when I'm talking about horizontal wrinkles. Now I've made it more fitted over the stomach, I'm starting to get horizontal wrinkles where it's a bit tight. So having taken it in at the small of the back, had a knock-on effect here at the front. What I might have to do is curve this front seam to allow for the curve of my stomach. Because as you can see, it doesn't matter, we've got loads of excess here, which is at the same height, but it's still pulling here because this is where the volume is, if you like. Do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take this pin out at the side seam and I'm going to take it in at the centre front instead, and then that should, so it'll be 2 centimetres at the centre front, and I'll ease it out. So I've almost given myself a dart, but I'm losing it in the centre front seam. And we'll need to lose it quite dramatically by this point at the latest, I think. So I'm going to put a pin in there. It's not going to grab any fabric, it's just going to act as a marker. Look at that. Much better. So now it's still riding down a little bit. How am I doing? Are my side seams straighter? Yeah, they're looking much straighter. It's flaring out quite a lot at the back. It's a very, very gentle A-line shape, this. It's almost a pencil skirt. So now I have to decide what I'm going to do with weird hip curve in the fabric, because I don't really want to make it any tighter here. You know, I don't want it to fit snugly over here. How tight do I want it? I think I am going to make it like a pencil skirt, but I want more flare over this bit, the tops of my thighs. I don't want it like that. And this is probably the only alteration I'm going to make, which I'm going to do asymmetrically, because my hips are so vastly different. Let's just start pinning and see. I so rarely wear a fitted skirt. My sort of sensibilities of how they should look are a little off. I'm pinning evenly out of either side of this side seam, but you may remember that actually the pattern pieces, when I made them, were uneven. So I'm sort of, not only am I making it fit, I'm truing them up as I go. Kind of want it to keep flaring there. So I'm going to taper to nothing with my pins at that point. Can you see? It's sort of a weird shape. But then again, I'm a weird shape, so. And then the same again on the other side. Part of me is very tempted to just make this an A-line skirt and add more flare. I'm not under rationing, so I don't have to worry about these things. And I know I just don't really like to wear fitted skirts. You can see that this one in particular there's more volume on the back. So I'm kind of pinning it a little bit unevenly over the seam. My seam is sort of going to roll forward, and I'm going to take it out unevenly on this side. I want them to finish at about the same point. Oh, this is causing my arm to cramp up. It's just sort of a weird, I don't know. It still feels like it's dipping down at the back, which I think it is. So maybe I just have to go much tighter. Let's see if I could pin this on myself rather than having to spin it round. It would all be a lot easier. Let's try at least. Ow. Stab myself. Ugh. So that's quite dramatic. Maybe I just need darts. Ugh. Who thought that such a simple 4-panel skirt would cause all the issues and the bodice would be fine? If I do make it a dress, it seems like everything hits in the right spot now at least. I think I have no idea. I'm going to go and look at this in a proper mirror and see what I think. So do you know what? I've been upstairs and looked in a proper mirror, full-length mirror, and actually I think it's fine. Where I've pinned it, now that I've got the waist hitting in the right place, you know, I've accommodated for the curve of my back and the curve of my bum and the hips. Actually, I think part of the issue was I had the camera pointing at a downward angle, which was screwing my perspective. But also, I think when I looked at the whole silhouette, bang on, it looked like the pattern illustration. So I think this is it for today. I think I've done everything I need to do. But yeah, I'm really pleased with it. I think this is all I'm going to be able to do today, because this is a lot of standing up, taking things on and off again. I am still a little, I've got this diagonal line here in the back, which I'm not thrilled about because the armhole is so low basically. If I were to lift the armhole up, that would probably go. But it's the style and I need the room to be able to move my arms. So I think I'm just going to have to accept that it's not going to be perfect. And that's okay. I think it's going to be good enough. I'm really pleased actually. I think I'm really going to capture the essence of the design. Do you know what I mean? I'm trying to, what makes something a 1940s garment? Well, it's the silhouette generally. It's the choice of fabric. And I think I've got the choice of fabric and now I've got the silhouette. So I think it's going to all come together nicely. I hope this video was useful to you. It's one of those things I do really want to do more sort of tutorial based stuff about fitting, but the thing is, my fit issues are not your fit issues, and so you might need something like a full bust adjustment, which I don't need, which is really difficult to demonstrate on yourself how to do it when you don't actually need it, if that makes sense. So I hope this was at least useful to see my process, and maybe you picked up a few tips like using safety pins and not straight pins, and starting from the shoulders and working down, doing things in little increments, you know, one adjustment at a time, because they all have a knock-on effect. I hope those things were useful. And what I'm going to do in the next video is I'm going to firstly sew all these in place to check that they still work when they're sewn into the fabric and not pinned. And then I'm going to demonstrate how to transfer all those alterations you've made to your paper pattern so that you can then make the real garment fit as well as this. That's all for today. I need to go and sit down. Thanks for watching. See you next time.